So what you guys have just done right now is participate in a tradition that is about 1,500 years old, about 1,500 years old, over a millennia ago. People would create in very dark confines, much like the cave, the sacred space, a place where there wasn't allowed much natural light nor unnatural light, like a candle, right? Why wouldn't you have a candle in a place where you were creating important manuscripts, for instance? Leave a light on fire. That's right. It was dangerous. You had scroll after scroll in these scriptoriums, is what they're called. And in this time period that is often wrongly referred to as the Dark Ages, we see a practice, this illumination of manuscript. An illumination from the inside out of the language that holds the keys to salvation, a language that maintains the religious beliefs and practices of a culture that is surviving after the fall of a Roman Empire. A people that are preserving their heritage in a way that is both a prayer meditative quality as well as the obvious sort of religious and academic qualities and pursuits. It is much a practice of worship as it is a development of expression or art. And so you guys are kind of working in that, but you're thinking about that letter based on who you are or what you're about. For the final draft, when you turn it in with the packet, so it'll just be like a warm-up that you put on the back of your packet, I want you to make it look nice. Do a final draft that has pen and ink. Make it look pretty. Maybe choose a font for the quality of your name if you want. Develop some texture like a good doodle or whatever based on some spirals. You can look at some ancient illuminated manuscript fonts if you like to kind of recreate that. And then choose your animal. Again, you can get a picture and just trace as you need to. But when you're done, it should be a nice sort of parchment type quality paper, or maybe if you don't have that, just computer paper is fine as well. But just make it look nice. And if you want, I want to kind of up the classiness of these things. This is only a quarter sheet. The final draft only needs to be a quarter sheet as well. So quality over quantity, right? But if you go to Dollar Tree, they actually have dollar frames that you can get. Now, I'm not requiring it, but I would love it if I have at least maybe 6 or 7 of you who decide that your work is that beautiful that you would actually mount it as if it were in a museum. So if you do that, I will definitely reward that by putting it on the board. I'd love to see some framed work in our class more than just the regular paper stuff. Kind of add to the museum-like quality of what this class is about. Ashley.
I have 2 questions. So my mom has a calligraphy.
You may use the calligraphy set.
Okay, and we're allowed to print up a picture of the animal?
Yes. Very good. Okay. So let's go ahead and use this as a springboard to understanding what happens to Europe after the fall of Rome. And I mentioned, again, that it's wrongly called the Dark Ages. So I'm going to talk about why that is as a brief overview of the time period. Give you some basic dates to kind of go over with this time period and what it ultimately, how we can appreciate the Middle Ages from an art history or art historical standpoint. This time period, which we call early medieval or medieval art. Medieval is the Middle English or the older English version of Middle Ages. Doesn't mean that it's evil. You often hear the word medieval like that's just positively medieval. People say that as if like what's happening in this time period is brutish and violent. Even though there is violence, just like all periods of time. Medieval just means Middle Ages. Dark Ages is even worse. It means that the area of time was dark and hateful and ignorant and brutish in its own right, primal. This is all CE. Don't think about BCE any longer. This time period is between 400 and about 1400 CE. It comes out almost as a phoenix out of the dying Roman Empire in the West. it will take about 1,400 years for the, well, I should say about 1,000 years, about a millennium, before you see Rome and Florence and Italy kind of taking its place again as sort of a renaissance or revival of artistic artistic significance. It'll build itself back up. In the meantime, there are people that are maintaining the torch in medieval Europe throughout Germany, and France, and England. We've talked at length about both Rome and then into the East and what goes on with the Byzantines in the East that seem very much almost like the Middle Eastern kind of countries like Turkey, and we talked about Constantinople. But now we need to turn our attentions to these other groups. These groups that the Romans would have considered these immigrants or these savages, didn't shave, ran into battle, naked sometimes, in a sort of wild abandon, would be a continual fear amongst the civilized Roman society, these outer groups of people. These outer groups of people, though, will slowly transition to the prominent forms by about the 7th century CE. So the non-Romans, we have the Huns in the east, and we also have Vandals and Franks and Goths in the west. So we have lots of different groups than just the Romans here, including Celts in Ireland, as well as Celts in France as well. These powers are dividing up between the Celts, these village communities, and the Vikings, this sort of maritime community of Nordish men, these men in the north of Europe. Strong men, men of the ship, shipbuilders, and again, very strong warrior-type characters. We think of the Vikings today as being very strong as they're from a violent standpoint. We don't know a lot about these people, in part because the way that they developed language and the way that they developed their self-expression was not permanent. It was unlike the older civilizations of Rome that had been founded much earlier and had established a full community, a sedentary lifestyle. These characters, these tribes were nomadic at heart. They were moving around, and they were much closer to the soil. They would actually be very similar to Native American culture. So what we see is more artifacts of their temporary lifestyle. We do know, however, that they did produce art, and most of that art was seen as a status symbol, just like it is in any other culture. Except these status symbols are much more portable in nature. So early medieval art is actually pre-Christian art. So that's what we're looking at right now. When we think of medieval, we think of knights and princesses and chivalry, but before that there was Vikings and Goths and Franks. The medieval period is one that is non-Christian. Christianity is in distinctly Middle Eastern feeling right now. Antiquity in the 4th and 5th century, the late antiquity period, it's very Middle Eastern. What we know today as Christianity as being the foundation of Western civilization, that is like the English, but Jesus Christ and what you're hearing here with the madrigal music, oh man, they weren't doing that in the East. That gets developed as a result of the infusion of pre-Christian Europe with the Christian Italian and then the Eastern Byzantine kind of qualities, the preservation of Christianity in those other areas. So what we're seeing is a transition. Let's start in England. Pre-Christian England has important elements of Viking culture, along with the Netherlands here. This whole region here was used quite frequently. And in a particular place called Sutton Hoo, which is a city outside of London to the east, we see a purse cover. Again, a portable item, a luxury item. Now, despite them being pre-Christian, despite them being quote-unquote savages according to the Romans, how would you describe this work? Yes?
Like, maybe, well, I think it's like gorgeous.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like someone that would be savage would be holding that.
Exactly right. And I think this goes to the first point about dispelling illusions about the Middle Ages. Again, that moniker I'm going to describe, the Dark Ages, you will never refer to it in modern history, modern historical parlance as the Dark Ages, because what we see produced in this time period is rivaling any of the expertise of Rome, I think, in terms of its goldsmithing, in terms of its civilized nature. Humans are humans no matter where they are. And I think that's what art kind of reveals about us when we actually discover it. So what we see here is a very strong focus on attention in detail, the quality of the assignment, even though it's small, just like your letters. Those letters are supposed to be building up an intricacy because you care about each little centimeter of your composition, that's very important when you have a portable item. If you want to show luxury and status, you've got to produce quality in the smallest of space. Dominic.
I have like the bottom right and bottom left characters.
Yeah.
It looked like the guy that was holding like his bowl.
On what object? Does anyone help out Dominic? He's inspired. He thinks that this is similar, like a common phenomena from England all the way down from Mesopotamia. Yeah, what is it, Beatrice?
It's the bowl leafy, and then there's more to it, but it's bowl leafy. No.
Huh?
It's not the lyre. It's the other one.
You're talking about the Torador fresco or the bowl leafing, the from Minos, from the Minoan art?
And there's also the one that shoots at the lyre.
The lyre. That's actually what these characters, very similar to the formulation on the bull lyre from Mesopotamia, from Sumeria. We're talking about almost, 3 millennia beforehand, and in a completely different spot in the world, and yet the same exact, one guy with like 2 bulls on the outside. Why? Why does humans start like this? Maybe they saw it, but probably not. Okay, this is all just like off someone else's head, out of someone's mind, yet they have the same formula. Put Dominic and go ahead and put +3 on your paper for identifying the lyre and kind of recognizing the person there. Beatrice.
Also, the one at the top before, like the top, the middle.
Yeah.
That one is also similar to the Nard. It was Nard.
All right, the spiraling snakes. See, these are important. What you're identifying is common phenomena. That's an official term that historians use to describe what seems like 2 completely different cultures producing the same kinds of works or same kinds of things. In this case, we see the same iconography being used. Something that's a bit unique to this area that I want to call attention to is this use of tracery. What we call tracery. There's an official term for it, a Latin term that's used in the historical period. Yes?
Ashley has a question.
Yes, Ashley. Next time, just don't interrupt me. I normally like to finish my thought and then I deal with questions. Thank you, Lorraine. Yeah.
Is there any lapis in there? Because I noticed there's gold and other animals, but I was wondering if there's lapis.
Oh, the lapis lazuli?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't see any blue on there. Maybe a little bit. Maybe these are like inlaid shell. I don't know. Good question, though. To sort of finish my thought before I forget, the Latin term for tracery right here is called horror vacui. It's a weird word, like horror, like a horror movie. So exactly what you would think. And then vacui is the V-A-C-U-I-I, vacui. 2 I's at the end there, vacui. Kind of weird word. But it's an important word because it gives us a very basic characteristic, sort of like contrapposto, of the Middle Ages. Contrapposto represents sort of Greek, classical Greece. Horror vacui will characterize the Middle Ages. The word means, horror, what do you think horror means? What's another name for horror? Terror, being afraid of, and that's what the word means. Horror means fear. Vacui, what do you think vacui means?
Spaghetti.
No, not like cool. That's not the. The root word is VAC, vac. What word has vac in it?
Vacuum.
Vacuum, right? Space. Fear of empty space, a vacuum. Fear of vacuum. It's not like the vacuum, not like that kind of vacuum, like your dog is afraid of, or babies are afraid of vacuums. They're afraid of empty space. So you would think then that and they're not actually afraid of empty space. It's just the characteristic that they describe with it, right?
Okay.
But they're using the empty space effectively by producing the most intricate detail, interlocking, weaving patterns. And we call this tracery or horror vakui. Very important characteristic. And you'll see this crop up again and again with Celtic Christian iconography and in English iconography. And so that all the Hiberno Saxon stuff is basically what we're talking about, the Irish and the Christian. You'll see it in the French, so the Carolinian art as well. This horror vakui will be translated throughout Europe. You can see it today. Yes, Dominic?
How do you spell the word?
Well, horror is like a horror film, and vakui is VACUII, I think. Like vakui, vakui, with two eyes at the end. Yeah.
The horror, it kind of made me think of, like, you know, the diorite in the Egyptian when they would, like, make it all compact.
Yeah, because the stone was very difficult to produce and render the image, so they kept it all compact. Very good. So this work here is, I think, one of the most interesting of the early works here. This is 7th century, and it represents that nice horror vakui style with some interesting iconography, flora and fauna in the center here, representing a luxury item. Interesting tracery with interweaving serpent kind of creatures like the Palette of Narmer. We also have fashion items like brooches and hairpins, crowns, bracelets, necklaces, all the stuff that we look at today, in fact, preserved in a way that is just as elegant as I think anything that you could buy in a store right now, was produced at this time period. I've seen so many more works that I was surprised about when I went to Canada, and which had some really interesting works. They had a Viking museum that they recently had out on display. It's a cool Hiberno Saxon stuff. But also in England, when I went up to what is it called? Edinburgh in Scotland, and then in Ireland. What is that name? Outside of Dublin, there is amazing museums that just have hundreds and hundreds of these things just on display. So I was surprised to see how much we actually had, because all I see in the textbook is just like one or two things, but they have lots of this kind of stuff. These garments were actually taken from the French, and their ability to do the jewelry was actually favored by Romans. They actually, like, despite the savages up in the north, they had some pretty good gold making skills. And so you see the same kind of pattern imitated by the Romans. They would take the sort of fastening of garments, these brooches, these clips that connected their fabrics together, and make them into symbols of luxury or status. And so you can see how the interweaving of that horror vakui is shown within the gold work itself. This is actually rendered and then imprinted or pounded, all these tiny little rivets in the middle here to create that sort of texturized pattern all around. Different textures here, very, very tiny detail. And gold is very malleable, so you can incise the most delicate of shapes. It can create paper thin stuff, almost like a gold leaf, and then produce it however you want to, putting precious stones in the middle here. Justinian, for instance, even had several of these in his brooches, in his wardrobe. So these are this is called the Merovingian looped fibula, which fibula is I think it's like a type of arm thing, right? It's like a leg thing. And so the same word is used.
I had you think.
Yeah, you're like doing
I was like that.
So is it tibia?
Tibia.
No. Okay, so anyways, I'm not an anatomy teacher, thank God. But these brooches are connected to those parts of your legs. That's part of why it's called a looped fibula, because it has elements of that it connects to your leg there. And it's Merovingian, which was the particular village in France that they were a people group in the region. Yes. Maybe this definitely has sort of the beak quality there. Probably it's maybe based on a stylized form of fauna, but I don't think it's actually supposed to, because you can see them repeating over and over again. So they're maybe using the natural curves, which is you can talk about, you can say natural curves, like nature curves, because this Horvakui style, the spirals and they'll kind of start looking more and more like vines and kind of connect to it, a stylized version of the vine tracery. Ashley.
It kind of reminds me at the top of like a pharaoh's headdress.
Oh, you mean like at the top
Yeah.
here? In what way does it look like Pharaoh's headdress?
Like just the jewels and the teeth, and it was a bird. I don't know if it is a bird.
Yeah. It's not a bird, but it definitely has sort of natural sort of shapes, just like Beatrice said. Dominic.
It was like the on the TV comedy. It was like one of the last pharaohs that they had, and like on his burial thing, like they had like it was like combined with snakes.
Like a snake?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they use the same kind of gold leaf jewelry stuff. So this idea of luxury items and gold has been around a long time, right? Here's another one from the Frankish looped fibula. So you can see this one here. It's actually a very similar style as the previous one, but except actually it might be the same exact one, just in a different color, upside down. What do you know? So there you go.
Lighting can do.
There's another one. What lighting can do to change the object? I think I like this lighting better because it shows off the different colors of it, as well as the details a little bit stronger in this one here. So this is in silver gilt with inlays of garnets and other stones. So garnets and other little precious stone metals that have been polished up. Maybe some glass that's polished and then cut, or in this case, rocks that have been tumbled to be smooth. If we were to go up to Norway in Osborg, there is a very interesting Viking museum that goes into some of their early medieval or Middle Ages work. They had toy kind of stuff or sculptural kind of things that look like models of chariots and other things, kind of just revealing some of the cultural practices of the people, chariot race and that sort of thing. So same kind of stuff going on that we see in Rome. They had these helmets, but most of the helmets didn't have the typical horns. Most Viking helmets didn't have horns. These are reproductions of maybe some of them that had something like this, but most of them didn't. And then axe heads there. They weren't really representing horns. They were more like not horns of animals, but horns that you like blow into. So most of them were supposed to look like this. And so there's these amazing, intricate design things that they've actually excavated that produce different sounds. And so the whole region is kind of misty, and it's mostly based on maritime trade, just like Venice. So it's a lot of water-based stuff in Norway, in the south of Norway. And so they'd actually, on each of the mountain tops, or as you're going through these fjords, these big rivers with huge mountain cliffs on either side, you have these people up there kind of blowing horns to kind of signal different things about the tide and about what's going on as far as traffic up ahead. And it becomes, again, just a cultural practice, much like the Swiss and the yodeling. You guys know about yodeling, right? Yodeling, yodeling, yodeling. That kind of that tonal pitch sounds and the Swiss has been around for centuries as well. But it was meant to communicate to people on other mountainsides, so you could hear them across the way. So here's all these like really amazing. But you notice that same style of tracery that goes on, that natural style, as Beatrice mentioned, the natural stylization of these curves, kind of making an elegant sort of form of each one of these here, based on maybe like a vine or something like that. Kind of have that feel to it. So this is an early sort of large water pot, like a crater. I love weapons. So they have like spearheads and like chain maces and all this kind of cool stuff, like daggers and stuff. Early like totem kind of qualities here, sculptures that would be put out by the riverside or by the ocean side. Here's an actual ship that's crafted and is in the water now with the Viking tools and equipment. There's people that live their lives just to make Viking equipment today to preserve the culture up in Norway and also.
Do they get money?
They do. They get paid like a cultural heritage money. They work in the museum, but they have literally next to the dock, and they just produce ships for understanding and researching Norwegian history. So it's really cool. They use like pitch, and they have special ways of pounding in wood into other wood and then cutting that off, and that makes these watertight rivets. So they don't use any metal or screws. It's all made out of wood, and it's an amazing process to watch people do it with. Weave their own rope, you know, going from literally the sheep to the rope. I mean, for every object, you're cutting down the tree and producing this. So everything is like completely natural for all of this stuff. And one of the questions that they're trying to consider was whether or not the Vikings could, how they were able to get a ship across the Atlantic as early as they did, because the Vikings were some of the earliest people to cross the Atlantic in order to get over here. So, but it was a really harrowing journey for those people to try and produce that. So there was a recent expedition to recreate the Viking landing up in Canada. And here's some of the remnants. This is all rivets to show you the shape, but here's what's left over that we found in the ocean here. So this is some of the sunken, authentic Viking ships. You can see here what's the ship is. But notice the elegant style of the ship. We're not talking about some sort of, you know, bulky, kind of brutish raft or something along those lines. I mean, they were subtly built, like bending the wood to make it, each of these curved shapes, to make it an elegant form as much as a worthy sea vessel, which is lending itself to this idea of their civility, I suppose. Now this was cool because, of course, at any good museum they have immersive practices. Now this is a child's exhibit, so there's like 2 or 3 like 4-year-olds here. I was like, Dad, put that on. So I like pick up from a 4-year-old. Sorry, I gotta take a picture here. I look like a Viking. I have a beard on. You're not a Viking. You're just a child. So I put on the fur robe there. And if this guy was in the picture looking like, what are you doing, dude? I look like a Viking. At least I was excited to. But this kind of shows you, let you walk around and stuff. Norway and all in the north of Europe, they have awesome museums. So just a heads up, go to the north. Italy has some poopy museums. You gotta go. It's got some amazing Renaissance stuff, and obviously all the church stuff, and Vatican, yada yada, the Pope, you know. But up in the north, they let you put on cool like clothes and armor and stuff. So it's way better. Yes.
What if there was a 5-year-old Viking?
Punch him in the face. No, he's only 5. You can't take me on. Look, I got a beard. I look like a Viking. I'm gonna get the robe on. All right. What if he had a beard? No, that's impossible. All right.
I like that little
Yeah. Now, an interesting practice that we see, a cultural practice, so something to write down about the Vikings here in the early Middle Ages. They would develop entire ships, produce these beautiful ships. When their king died or when some important leader died, they'd actually take one of these ships and they'd let the ship sink. Yeah, they'd actually let the ship sink. They would kill the, or they would purposely sink the ship with the leader and all of his very beautiful stuff. Imagine discovering one of these for the first time. It's these beautiful ships, let alone all the gold, intricate things that are literally as precious as anything else. Well, yeah. Except you just give it to a museum. Nowadays, you can't keep anything that you find. It all has to be relinquished to a museum. You can't sit and, if you found like ancient Spanish coins or something, you don't get to get to buy something like this $1 million coin or whatever. You have to give it away to the museum. Hopefully they give you something for your trouble. But yeah. Yes?
Okay, so that ship looks like the one from Willy Wonka.
And in fact, the good pull there, because this sort of style here is very Tim Burton, isn't it? That quality there. So he's obviously inspired by the natural curvature of this sort of Norwegian Viking kind of culture. Yes?
It also looks like the Descending Hill from The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Right, that Tim Burton style, very good. So you can see this is actually one of the most, this one here that we currently have, I have pictures of myself with it because it's amazing. It's its own building. It's almost like a cathedral built just to this one, or like there's 2 or 3 of them, and it's very well preserved. The water has preserved the different ships here very, very well. So this Augsburg ship, I was like, it's just, I said that was pretty good. It takes a long time and it's very difficult to get up to Norway. Like hot dogs are like $20 and stuff, so it's just really like hard to eat. We basically didn't eat for a week. We like were stealing food from like the cabinets in our hostel and stuff with like that was like free food. It was like someone's leftover spaghetti and stuff. Really gross. But it was worth it to go to see this beautiful museum that they have here in Norway. Then there's once Vikings kind of transition into Christianity, they take their shipbuilding style and they make a unique church out of it. And this is kind of a cool thing because these are called stave houses. Stave, S-T-A-V-E. Stave houses are part of the Christianized Norwegian culture. So eventually missionaries and monks arrive in the Viking cultures around the 7th and 8th century. And at first they're persecuted, but all it takes is one or two leaders to recognize the importance of maybe becoming a Christian, or maybe have a legitimate conversion experience. But nevertheless, eventually this whole culture develops a Christian flair to it, a Christian spirit. In part, we'll realize the major reason that people become Christian in the North, in Europe, is, well, I'll ask you the question. Why do you think that Vikings or other cultures look at this sort of Christian, this Christian tradition and say, wow, this is something for me, when they don't really need it necessarily? Justin?
I think that the Christianity is thinking that they need redemption or something, or they know that the stuff that they do is kind of bad, so they want to be redeemed by something.
So you're taking the purist approach to the reason why they convert. Now, they might inherently feel guilty for their savage ways and need some sort of Christianity. So that could very well be. I'm not going to dismiss the fact that there's authentic conversion. But there might be a more political reason. Dominic?
They probably wanted like eternal life after.
Again, that's the purist way. And but see, Vikings had eternal life. They had Valhalla, guys. They knew about eternal life. It was the Thor kind of eternal life, where you live like as a perpetual soldier, and you get to drink of the cup of victory, this horn, and you get to live in the hall of warriors if you were brave enough. Beatrice and then Justin take a crack at it.
I think maybe with conversion to Christianity, they wouldn't have someone that would rule them. They wouldn't have rulers.
Well, they have their own rulers, but I kind of know what you mean. You're thinking that maybe Christianity will be more of an equality system, like Jesus talked about, the first will be last, etc. No, because Christianity, unfortunately, is very politicized now. So that idea of leaders and kings are still going to be kings, even if they're Christian. They're not going to give over their crowns to the poorest among them, even though Jesus might have. Yeah.
So to look good, and
what does that mean, to look good?
So like, if they're Christian, people would think, oh, they're Christian, so they have to be.
See, again, you're as purist. If you see a Christian, maybe that's.
They're trying to look good.
They're trying to look like somebody. Yeah. That's for sure. Yes.
Maybe for political power.
What does that mean? Why?
Because the Roman Empire was Christian, and they had a lot of power.
Yes.
Maybe they have the thought that if they're Christian, they could have a lot of power.
You hit the nail on the head. Rome falls. There's no centralized power in the West. How do I develop that? Maybe I, as the Viking leader of the tribe in Norway, I could be the resurrected Roman Empire. All I need to do is be Christian like Constantine was Christian. And that's what you start seeing. You see it in the France, you see it up in the north. All these places attempting to resurrect what they consider to be the Holy Roman Empire. And so you kind of start seeing them kind of continue in that tradition. But they all have their unique things that they bring from their background traditions. For instance, the stave house, to go back to this now, this Christianized Viking culture uses their shipbuilding techniques to create churches. Now, different than the stone arches and things that are going on in Italy. Italy is deriving its architectural forms from Roman concrete and quarrying and all the marbling and all that kind of stuff. But the Vikings and the people up in Norway are doing it using wood and pitch and those rivets that I talked about, and they're building churches that look like ships. But what's kind of cool about it is it almost looks like those. What else does this look like to you? Yeah.
The non-Western thing that we did.
Chinese.
That
Phoenix Hall.
yeah, the doges or those palaces of China and Japan using those repeating forms here. Very similar style, but again, common phenomena using a repeating sort of roofing structure there that's slanted so that it's very, very rainy there, so it's part of the way the rain rolls off of it. But it was watertight and it was preserved even today. This is a reconstruction, but there's many authentic ones that have maintained the test of time despite wear and tear of the wood. They've been preserved. You see the shipbuilding sort of head masts that would be kind of like, well, what do these look like if you're thinking about like a Gothic cathedral?
Dragons.
Well, from a Gothic cathedral, what would be on a Gothic cathedral out of marble? Something like gargoyles, right? The same kind of thing, a patriarchaic in nature, just like the head of a prow of a ship or something along those lines. Lorraine and the Beatrice.
It looks like you had long hair in this picture. Look at that. Look at
Long hair?
Look
You
at that.
look like you have a mullet because the back looks
Yeah,
like
yeah,
his
yeah.
hair coming down.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. That's just the side of the roof. No, I had fairly short hair. Shush. Yeah, I have long hair now. This is the longest it's been in a while.
I
What?
think that it looks more like the condo from Japan.
Yes. Like a Japanese architecture?
Yeah,
Like the pagoda kind of style?
but did they, like, did Japan build off of that?
No. It's common phenomenon. Yeah, they're building similar types of buildings from each other. Interiors are just as beautiful as the exterior. Sorry about my ugly face right there. I just moved out of the way, but the interiors have the apse structures. They look like churches from Italy, except that they're all produced out of wood carving. So you'll see wood carving and other types of forms of media very different than the stone work that is based in antiquity. These works are produced because they're shipbuilders, so there's something different about it. Here's a different angle of the same work. You can see some of their Celtic crosses or their Viking crosses here produced as well, like the prow of a ship. Speaking of animal head posts, this is one of your works that represent this time period. Again, I haven't said specifically yet because we look at illuminated manuscripts from this time period as well, but this all comes in the time period of early medieval, or location is important as well, because up in the north we call this Hiberno Saxon. Anything from Scotland and England and even into Norway, these areas are all referred to as Hiberno Saxon. They're the sort of foundations of English as we know it today. This is the best way I can describe it. In Augsburg, there is an animal head post that is like a tiger kind of hybrid of things. But they don't just produce a naturalized version of it. It is stylized. It has that Horovacui construction in the middle there. Overlapping tracery. And for a while, this style, this Horovacui, is also called, quote unquote, the animal style. Sort of like animal style fries at In-N-Out or whatever. Do you guys ever eat those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, animal style is that you take these animals and you sort of stick them in the Horovacui, in the tracery. And in this case, the animal itself is produced with the tracery. But many times you see like stave churches or doors where you'll start seeing, if you notice, some of this work will be like Wells Waldo, deers and flowers and birds kind of floating within the tracery. It's just kind of cool. And you might want to produce something like that in your illuminated manuscript, in your letter. Kind of draw little animals or repeating patterns within the tracery, make it part of the curvatures of the object. These Vikings were considered by many to be pirates. They were people that would go and plunder and that kind of thing. They're mostly traders, though. For a long time, they actually destroyed the Christian monastic communities, especially in England. England is one of the earliest places to convert to Christianity, which is very surprising considering that it's one of the farthest borders of the Roman Empire. But England kind of takes on the idea of, we could be the Holy Roman Empire again if we continue this. There's also very, very zealous monks that went to the far outreaches of the known world, basically, to set up monasteries and churches, to kind of live in solitude because there's a lot of open space here, and to continually preach to these savage kind of people according to them. It'd sort of be like the push even today to go to like Africa or Indonesia or these other places that are just very different than the cultures now. Instead of going to your neighborhood down the street or your bad neighborhood in Los Angeles or in Detroit or something, instead you go to the farthest outreaches, the hardcore of hardcore in terms of missionary work. And so the early churches are actually established in monastic communities in England, and the Vikings are oftentimes their enemies. And so they convert. So many of them convert. Not all of them, obviously. There were still communities and bands of Vikings that did not care for Christianity. But we see this roaring beast on the front of a Viking ship representing their early style. Yes?
Wait, did you back real fast? And it says approximately 5 inches high. Is it supposed to be feet, inches?
You know, that's actually a good point. I don't think it's quite only 5 inches high. I think maybe just the head. The whole thing should be a little bit longer than that, but I'd have to double check. That's a good question. I would have just copied and pasted this from a website, so it could be that it is just incredibly tiny. Maybe it's just. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think the whole. I actually have a picture with it, and it's much higher than this. It's much taller. It's probably like 5 feet tall. In fact, yeah, here it is. Oh, this is a different one though, but you can see the same kind of style. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's about. I don't know. It's just the head itself. Maybe is 5 inches. That's a good question. But you see this work here produced, and it looks, maybe about a foot and a half. I love this, and you can see here. Can you see any of the animals within this work here?
Yeah. Peacock.
You see this like wolf kind of thing or dog? Deer.
It looks like an peacock.
Legs.
That was a
Head.
peacock.
You see a peacock? Where do you see a peacock?
Where you just put your hands. Peacock. No, not there. Not there.
It all just looks like twisty lines.
No, this is definitely an animal right
Yeah,
here.
that's a peacock right there.
No, this isn't a peacock. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, it is. Oh my goodness. I will
It
show
looks like a
you.
snake. Get up there.
See?
What?
Okay, so
No peacock. I don't
this is
see
the
a peacock.
eye, and that's like the little beak, and then that's like the little thing behind, and then that's the neck, and like the tail all folds up and the little legs. Peacock.
No.
I know what I'm talking about.
No. Do you see the 4 legs?
It's not 4 legs.
Yeah, there's clearly Lorraine. There's clearly 4 legs. I'm right and you're wrong. Okay. So this is a good example of that that animal style, sort of a runestone quality. Runestones are like landmarkers for people on their journeys up and down the river and along the cultures here. Here's an example, one of these kind of traceries based on various animals sort of interweaving through it. Beautiful line kind of journeying, but they usually told something in grave marker site. I don't think this is, but this is very old. This is about the 11th century within a stave church. It's got Christian iconography attached to it. You can almost see something like this out of like Lord of the Rings or something, right? Like it looks like that kind of. And Middle Earth is produced based on Hiberno Saxon works anyway. So Tolkien and Lewis and all those kind of fantasy writers, they love Hiberno Saxon iconography. So just a heads up on that.
Mr. Moore.
That's where we'll stop with the wood carved portal of the stave church. This is produced out of wood. Does it look like wood? I mean, that's pretty amazing. So this is their ability to create natural sort of curvature out of wood and make it a stylized, beautiful interweaving. You notice that this is going to be the predominant backstory to what we think of as medieval illuminated manuscripts that are very Christian in nature. They actually derive from pagan roots, much like most of Christian cultural practice throughout Italy and the East. They borrow from their neighbors. All right, guys, that's it for today. Please make sure you get your snapshots done today so that tomorrow you can really start producing some good information for us in this discussion based on each of the different time periods of Middle Ages. They borrowed. Why not say borrowed it and made it their own. Yeah, I need to print that. Excuse me.